In this video, I'm going to do a couple of things. One is I'm going to show you how to find what the restrictions are for the equation. And I'm also going to actually do what the question asks, or the problem asks, is to find W. So the first thing I want to do before I start working a problem is find out what my restrictions are. Now, actually, I know this is a formula that exists out there. So I know the solutions are going to probably be defined and everything is nice. But just to model how to find what the restrictions of the variables are going to be, I don't want to have imaginary solutions. And we get imaginary solutions when there's negative numbers underneath the radical symbol. So I'm kind of taking a look at this, what's underneath the radical, and I know whatever that is, it's got to stay positive or we're dealing with imaginary numbers. So I'm going to take h minus 2w, and I know that has got to be non-negative, meaning it's got to be greater than or equal to 0. And as long as it is, I know I'm not dealing with imaginary solutions. Now, in order to put the restriction on h, I'm just going to solve this equation for h by adding 2w to both sides of this problem. When I do that, I get h is greater than or equal to 2w. Now, what if I wanted to put the restriction on w? Well, you can do that too. I'll change pens for us. To figure out what the restrictions are on w, I'm just going to divide both sides by 2. And I can tell that w has got to be less than or equal to half of h. And notice when I read that backwards because I was reading what w was. So I was reading from right to left when I read it. That's why I read it as a less than symbol. W is less than or equal to half of h. So we have two restrictions you can look at. You can look at what I had in blue there. And I will circle that for us. Our restriction on h was h is greater than or equal to 2w. Our restriction for w would have been that w is less than or equal to half of h. Okay, after we do know what our restrictions are, and we know what would keep our solution real, now I can actually go in and find w. So if I was actually going to solve this problem, I typically want to get rid of everything that's outside of the radical first. So I see that there's an 8 being multiplied to what's in the radical, so I'm going to get rid of that first by doing the opposite of multiply, which is divide by 8 to both sides of the problem. When I do that, the right side will cancel, leaving me with just square root of h minus 2w equals v over 8. And now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to square square both sides, because the opposite of a square root is a square. And notice I'm doing it to the whole thing on the left side. I'm square rooting the whole side. Squaring the whole side. I'm doing that so that this cancels out, and I will be left with h minus 2w is equal to v squared over 64. And then now I want to, I'm still working to get the w by itself, so I'm going to subtract h from both sides. And after I do that, I am going to divide both sides of the problem, because I'm working to get w by itself. I'm going to divide both sides of the problem by negative 2. Ooh, and I get something that doesn't look real pretty. And then I'm going to take this side of the problem and I'm going to simplify it. And when I try to simplify this, I'm still left with this. I know that dividing by a negative 2 is the same thing as multiplying by a negative 1/2. It's just get the reciprocal. So I'll rewrite it this way. Now I'm going to just distribute in. And I will end up with negative v squared all over 128 minus, plus, because the signs would change when you have two negatives, to 1/2 h equals w. And although that is possibly a good answer, a lot of times we want to put it all together with one common denominator. So in order that these fractions can have a common denominator, I'm going to get a common denominator between 128 and 2. And my common denominator is 128. And I need to change this fraction over here by multiplying the bottom and the top by 64. And I will get the 64h. That's how this fraction will change. And then, of course, the negative v squared is still there, and that was a positive. So you could also see it written this way. Now, the other way you could write it, if you don't want to to write it like that, is you could also write that as, and I will get a different color pen so you can see what I'm talking about. You could also write it as 64h minus v squared all over 128 equals w. And all I did here was I just got a common denominator so that I could put it all over one fraction instead of two. Now keep in mind what our restrictions were way back here at the beginning, which were h was greater than or equal to 2w, or w was less than or equal to half of h. And as long as that's the case, that would be two good possible answers. Technically, even this would be a good answer as well. It's just a matter of what form you want it in.